Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Caroline Carralero, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about these amazing things that you're doing with Daily Nouri. And you actually have a new product coming out that we want to highlight too. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah, of course, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. I love this format, and I think that it's awesome to get to know people better and where they came from, because obviously it has so much to do with what they're doing today. So
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So where were you born?
So I was born in Sacramento, California. So Northern California, born and raised, and pretty normal upbringing. I'm the youngest of three, so I have two older siblings, wonderful parents, and give a lot of credit to them. And just creating a household where we can really learn and grow and flourish. One thing that's different, and I've mentioned several times in other interviews, because I do think it has kind of shaped how I have, entered the business world, but I was homeschooled growing up. And so, my mom and my dad, but really my mom noticed that the, local public school wasn't awesome where we lived. And, it was a fine option, but I think she had a couple of friends that she was around that were also homeschooling their kids, and they had positive things to say. And so this was in the 90s. So it's definitely not the easiest thing to homeschool in California. So she started this with my older brother, right? And then my sister and I both, all of us were homeschooled. And it was, cool because she did it, the old school way. You create a school, essentially. You go get, an affidavit and you get everything set up. You do it by the books. Again, this is the 90s in California, so not easy to do, but she went through all the hoops to do it. And the other thing, anyone who's homeschooled kind of knows this, from I'm 31 now, but like from that generation, you didn't have the the screens, the iPads, the laptops. I mean, just the work it takes to get good curriculum, right? It's you're going through catalogs, sifting through catalogs to figure out what kind of curriculum you want to teach your children. So really a ton of effort goes into it, right? This isn't just like Zoom school where you plop your kid in front of the screen all day. So that's how I was raised, and started that as early as I can remember, right? Because my two older siblings were also being homeschooled. And so I was probably, 3, 4 when I started working on school, and I was young for my grade. So I ended up graduating high school, which I'll get to at 17, and going to college. So I was young, but it started just because I was ready for school, and two older siblings, and you're being educated at home. So it's pretty simple. So yeah, that's how I was raised, and wonderful upbringing, very, diverse interests. We all played sports. I played soccer. So I was really competitive in soccer for a decade or so. And we did, instruments and Girl Scouts and all the extracurriculars. And then we had kind of, which is again more popular now, definitely became more popular during COVID. We had these kind of co-ops, these groups of different families that we get together with. And the model that we kind of used is we had, when we got a little bit older, we had, in primary years, these kind of functional experts that would teach us different things. So we had like a science teacher and a writing and lit teacher, and these different classes we'd go to. So it was pretty cool. So very different way of learning, but, in kind of reflection of that, and I've thought about this a lot over the last 10 years, I really did a lot of self-starting. So you'd wake up in the morning and it wasn't, hey, the bell's ringing, go sit in your desk, you sit there all day. I mean, we had a really independent learning environment. And for some, that's great. Typically, to kind of generalize here a little bit, young girls tend to do well in it because they create their own structure and they're organized and they like, all of their things. And boys tend to have a little bit harder time. A lot of young boys just need a little bit more structure and guidance. And so my sister and I loved it. We did really well with it. My parents, I think, took a really great approach in that they always, had an option of a school, this private school that was local, a Christian school that they kind of had identified as aligned with their values. And so my brother ended up going there in sixth grade. We were asked the question, "Hey, do you want to go?" And my sister and I both really liked being homeschooled. And so we said, "No, we're fine." So it was a very well rounded, but definitely entrepreneurial in the sense that
Mhm.
we were being raised in all day in a school room, right, which was our
Yeah.
the first kind of family room in the house, that was converted into a schoolroom, big whiteboards everywhere, and it also doubled as my mom's office. So she had a accounting business, bookkeeping business, and so she was, she had her desk in there, and she was teaching us throughout the day, and then also working. So really
Wow.
interesting in hindsight. Yeah, so we were around her business a lot. So like I remember helping her run payroll when I was 10 years old,
Yeah.
and QuickBooks and stuff. So it was really interesting. We had a lot of exposure to her different clients and who she was working with her business. And yeah, so that's kind of the education background, but definitely a good part of the story because it definitely, gave me, I don't know, the confidence, the flexibility to not be afraid to start a company or do something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. And then after homeschool, we went to an international baccalaureate school, which is a good, academic rigor in public school.
Mhm.
It's like 25, 30 minutes from our house, wasn't the local school, but really had, I think at one point the calculation was over 30 languages spoken on campus. I mean, a crazy
Wow.
diverse school. And that was, so think about that freshman year of high school, my first class is the first time I've ever been to school, right?
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
first class, it's like an English class. I'll never forget it. And I wasn't too impressed by it. Of course, I'd been in school environments and been to
Yeah.
classes with people and stuff. So it was like a different world, but I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get the gist of
Mhm.
it. And you're used to independent learning, it's kind of, slow and
Mhm.
frustrating because you're kind of, the class is trying to, is still kind of, I'm gonna say this nicely, but still kind of like accommodating for the lowest denominator, right? So it's, you got that
Yeah.
kid acting
Welcome
up.
to public education,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so
I
it's
mean,
kind of like,
it's
okay.
crazy.
Yeah, quickly I was like, okay, I get the gist of this, but I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I played sports, played a couple of sports, soccer, golf, and then I ended up getting really involved in student government and I really liked that. That was kind of
Yeah.
my little, path, and had my friend group that were all involved in it and so did a lot of the leadership stuff and I just liked it. It was something that I naturally was good at and so I think it was sophomore class vice president, junior class president, and then was
Oh,
student president. So I got really involved in that. And just again, I think it's an interesting parallel. You learn a lot of good skills running
yeah.
events, budgeting, and everything else.
It
Um,
helps to shape you and form you.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does. So I loved high school. I had a great experience there. And then, being the youngest, you kind of have this advantage of watching your siblings and seeing what they do. And so both of my older siblings had did very different paths of education and college and everything else. But I had narrowed it down and I knew that I wanted to stay in California. I loved California and I wanted a smaller school. I knew that I didn't want a big UC. I didn't want huge state school. I really kind of liked this idea of classes that were 30 to 50 people where you actually knew the professor and you got this great education. So I ended up going down to the University of San Diego. I looked at LMU and a few others
Mhm.
in California, but ended up down at the University of San Diego and again started young. I was 17. Loved it, just absolutely loved it. And then kind of an interesting turn of events, it was 2 3 weeks into my first year of college and I got connected with this group of entrepreneurs who were down in San Diego and they were starting a juice company called
Mhm.
Suja Juice. And it was kind of a spinoff of, an entrepreneur who had a raw food restaurant up in the North County of San Diego. And
Mhm.
the restaurant failed, but all the customers loved this high quality juice. And so
Mhm.
he started to produce this juice, deliver it to yoga studios, kind of this hyper San Diego wellness community. And it was one of those things, it was just the right time too, the right
Mhm.
timing for this category. Healthy beverage was new and needed a ton of innovation. And so, I connected with them and, I thought of it, to be frank, I thought of it as like a fun internship during my
Yeah.
first college. So I just kind of said, hey, let me know if you ever need help. I was nannying, babysitting, doing all kinds of stuff, involved in campus stuff. And that company just ended up, catching and doing very well, and
Mhm.
was a part of launching the business, launching the brand, because it wasn't a brand. So going through this whole process of regulatory and production and creating packaging, and then getting, we had a sales team that was getting it in front of Whole Foods, and we launched Whole Foods. So kind of had this, young, almost like as an intern, this, perspective of this company growing. And I
Yep.
just, wanted to get more and more involved. And so the CEO was gracious enough. He was a father. He had children that were my age, in this college age. And he's like, this is going to be an amazing experience if you want to help. And so long story short, the business grew quickly. I was able to really, add a lot of value where I could. And we created this role, the VP of special projects. And so
Mhm.
I had a lot of knowledge and insight because I was around the business from day one. And so as you
Mhm.
grow and grow and grow and you bring on more people, it was just really valuable to the team. So I was there for 3.5 years. And, that's kind of where I got, we joked, but it really is probably the best way to describe it. We called it my MBA in Suja juice, but really got like an MBA in
Yeah.
health and wellness, but also consumer packaged goods and the food system, sourcing. We were sourcing 400,000 pounds of fresh organic produce every week. So, I mean, we had all of this, I know your background in farming, we had a crash course of, how do we work with farmers and
Mhm.
create these beneficial contracts, we called it contract growing, right? Where
Mhm.
we go all throughout the central California coast, and then you would go, Central Valley and the California coast,
Mhm.
and also into Arizona, obviously during the winter.
And
So I mean,
lock up your crops and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was really, really interesting. And then the other side of it was all the distribution and how do you build a, beverage brand in New York City, right? And these crazy hard markets. And so, yeah, it was just awesome. I loved it. I got, my first experience there with probiotics. We started to put probiotics into the beverages. So that was my first really taste of the probiotic category and
Mhm.
why they're important, where we're at, and how these beneficial ingredients can help people supplement what's missing from their lifestyle. So that was really my first big professional experience. I've always worked, I mean, growing up, we always had jobs and always worked since I was probably 12 or 13.
Mhm.
So that was my first big experience. And then after that, I went and started a company. 3.5 years in, there was into Suja, there was kind of a bigger investment deal between Coca-Cola and Goldman Sachs. They did
Mhm.
this interesting joint venture deal. The company was valued just under $300 million. We'd grown it really fast, breakneck speed. I mean, I could talk
Mhm.
about that for days, but it was really an interesting, crazy growth story during those years. And, a lot of these investors got money out at that time and everything else. And so it was also a time where we were hiring a lot of, executives from other food and beverage companies. And my learning was kind of like plateauing because I was used
Mhm.
to kind of the really high level growth. And so the CEO's daughter and I decided to go start another company called Namva, which was really just filling the fiber gap that we were
Mhm.
hearing a bunch of feedback from juice because it doesn't have fiber. A lot
Right.
of consumers were saying, hey, we need fiber back in these products. And so we started this company called Namba, which was terrific. It was a smoothie pouch. And so
Mhm.
but it was kind of a unicorn product. So we only had it out, we had the business open for about 2.5, 3 years. It was a difficult product. I mean, a unicorn in the sense of like, we were using all organic raw fruits and
Mhm.
vegetables. The pouch itself was hard. And then we weren't heat processing it, which most of the little pouches that you see on the market are all heat processed. So we were trying to do
Mhm.
things obviously superior,
Raw.
which is like fresh,
Yeah.
just
Right.
really difficult. Like the
Yeah.
cost of doing it was just crazy. So that's, we had that out for a few years. And then, unfortunately I had to close the business, which, you look back and everyone says this and it sounds cliche, but you learn more through those experiences than
Oh,
you do
sure.
any of the successful experiences. I mean, it was just a
Yeah.
phenomenal learning experience. And so yeah, so then after that, it was kind of left at a place where I did some investing and did some advising and consulting, and was really, to put it simply, just helping friends that I had met along the way that were starting
Mhm.
businesses that were either adjacent or kind of similar, and I could lend some help to. But I was really, at very much at a point where, one, I still really wanted to help and operate. I had a lot of, I would just call it operator in me, and I really didn't feel like I wanted to invest or advise. I really wanted to have kind of rolling up the sleeves and being involved in the day to day. And I was mid 20s. I still had a lot of like just youth and energy. And then also, I was very convinced that this category, the gut microbiome and this area of human health, was just absolutely worth the time. And kind of in hindsight, reflecting on it now, being a few years into this, I mean, that was the right move for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it's been a very difficult business for certain reasons. We're still just a young business, a growing business, but it's very clear to me going through COVID, going through now this metabolic, health crisis, weight crisis that we have. I mean, all of these things, infertility issues, hormone issues with women. I mean, all of this can be really connected back to the gut microbiome in some way, shape, or form. So it's very great. I think the decision that I made to just go all in on this, and again, hard category, but all businesses are, and all businesses worth building are super hard. So yeah, so that's kind of what led me to be here. And we started working on Nouri, Daily Nouri, as we rebranded it recently, Daily Nouri. I started working on the business in 2018, 2019, just kind of
Mhm.
gathering data of what's out there. So, filed the corporation and did all those things, but really just is gathering a lot of market research and data. And what I found was that there was a big opportunity for innovation,
Mhm.
really clear innovation that focused on different need states. And so products that we kind of, and one of the phrases we use is kind of go beyond the gut. So
Mhm.
connecting the digestive system to things like the brain, and connecting
Mhm.
it to hormones and to weight health. So kind of these very logical connections of how important this system is and how it connects the whole body. So
Mhm.
that we call that kind of need state product development. That was very clear to us. And then also, just the overall ability to innovate, use better ingredients, newer ingredients. What
Mhm.
I found at mass market was that there was a lot of these companies that are the big companies. So your Procters and
Mhm.
Gamble's, your Nestle's, your Clorox types of companies that are invested in this category, and they pump, 20, 30, 40 plus $1 million of marketing, sometimes annually, right? Into
Mhm.
their businesses. So then once they prop up a product or a SKU, they don't really change it much. So it's been
Yeah.
on the market for 10 years. So there's always opportunity to kind of look at that and evaluate how can we make these products better.
Well, and
Um,
innovate, right? I mean, you're innovating all the
exactly,
time. Yeah.
exactly. So there was that. So we just identified some big opportunity to disrupt and to innovate, and then have a really strong price point. So I leveraged a lot of my kind of background and wherewithal in retail. I had a strong strong knowledge and insight on how to work with retail. So when we started the business, it's always been an omni-channel business, meaning we service all channels.
Mhm.
But we really did focus a lot on retail the first couple of years. And now we're really rounding that out, and we're really strategically focusing on Amazon D2C. So we're, available at Walmart nationally, and Albertsons and Safeway, HEB in Texas, Meyer. So a few thousand stores across the country. We'll add a couple thousand more, right? We'll continue to add the retail, but the main focus now is just competing and staying, which is crazy competitive and crazy
Mhm.
expensive, staying, front of mind in the digital world. And our vision for this is to be, the household probiotic product and prebiotic, but really the household gut microbiome or digestive
Mhm.
product. So that means we'll go in and develop product for all ages and stages of life. So we want to have products for men, products for women, products for children, which we're working on right now, infant, toddler, all of that. So you will
Wow.
probably never see us getting into like your core multivitamin or protein powders or stuff. I mean, everything has to have a central gut health story.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's been really exciting. And I think that's a pretty comprehensive background, but I'll leave it there. And any specific questions or areas we can dig deeper, but that's kind of what's led me to here.
Well, I think it's probably incredibly surprising, but I have a ton of questions. So I think the cool thing is what you're doing now in terms of how you're ramping up and what you're doing with your company is right in line with this conversation that seems to have come up about, or seems to be more prevalent about, metabolism, right? And specifically metabolic levels and how it affects your health, how the
Yep.
gut biome, affects your health, that kind of thing. Um, so it's really cool. Your timing is really, really good. So
Yep.
if it's okay, can we go back real quick and let me
Yeah.
just ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
Actually, more than two. So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Sacramento?
Great question. Um, I mean, we had all of our family around, right? So for the most part, we had aunts, uncles, cousins. I mean, we had our family around. So I would always say that's top of mind. I mean,
Mhm.
now I have a baby, and it's like we've got family spread out all around the country. And so now I'm kind of, when reflecting on that, that's probably the best part. Otherwise, location wise, it's close to Tahoe. We skied a
Mhm.
lot. I love skiing. You're close to the Bay Area. It's just a great kind of central location. It's boring. It
Yeah.
gets kind of a reputation for being a little boring, but that's fine. You grew up in Oklahoma. You know how everyone has a reputation of what something's like, but it's a good place to live. And yeah, I would say, I mean, the most important thing and the best thing was just having all of our family kind of central to Northern California.
So growing up, who is the most influential person to you?
Oh, definitely my parents. I mean, parents for sure. Because, the other thing is it wasn't like I was in school at a young age and it was like some teacher or someone. I
Yeah.
mean, it's definitely my parents. Combination of them both. I mean, my dad's very structured and kind of predictable, and that's good. There's a lot of good in the structure. My mom is kind of the opposite in that she's more kind of creative, total risk taker, so
And she's
it's
an accountant.
yeah, yeah, she's a book for accounting, but yeah, I mean, she starts her own businesses and has ideas about all kinds of different things that she can start. And she's,
Yeah.
she's just been, not afraid. I think that's the simple way of putting it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So I
So
mean,
your dad was an accountant too?
he's in finance, yeah, so
Oh, there
he
you go.
works finance and accounting. They kind of my mom technically got the finance degree, my dad accounting, but actually, like, the way that their professions have kind of reversed, so
Yeah. Welcome to life, right?
yeah, exactly,
So you
exactly.
mentioned earlier a couple of times how difficult it would be to homeschool kids in the 90s in
Yeah,
California. And one of the things I wanted to address, and for people that, and there's a lot of people, we're in 59 countries now, so there are a lot of people outside of California that are
yeah.
listening to this. The reason for it, and I'm going to ask you, is it because of the higher cost of living that we have in California?
Is that what makes it harder to homeschool? Yeah,
Correct.
I mean, yeah, I mean, my parents made a very clear choice to
Yeah.
not
It
have
was a
my
sacrifice, right?
mom, yeah, in a full-time career. Now, granted, she owned her own company,
Right.
and so she was still able to work. So she was still able to work, around school. So I mean, kudos to her, because they really kind of, for a lot of those years kind of flipped, right? My dad
Yeah.
would be gone working all day. He would do dinner, and she would really work a lot in the afternoons and the evening. So I mean, they made it work, but there was a very clear and distinct sacrifice that's made when you
Yeah.
decide to homeschool. So yes, the cost of living, but also just like the regulatory landscape,
Mhm.
infrastructure wasn't friendly. Now we're looking at probably the most failed education system
Mhm.
imaginable in the
Yeah.
United States. I mean, if you take the, top 40 developed countries, we are ranked dead last.
Yeah.
We are first in cost per pupil.
Mhm.
So it's a totally failed system. Again, it's a
Absolutely.
food system, you can't deny that. The results are just remarkably failed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably based on kind of my parents' values, their faith, a lot of other things that
Mhm.
they saw, for again, back to the point of my mom being a risk taker, I think she was, confident that they could, piece something together that was better. And kudos to them, because it was a very unpopular choice. I mean,
Yeah.
now you have the momentum, particularly over the last 4 years, kind of doors wide open during
Yeah.
COVID. 2020, 2021. But even before that, you had a lot of movement towards school choice policies,
Mhm.
homeschool policies, technology getting better. Again, the curriculum itself, so
Mhm.
that, an average parent can feel confident in getting the right curriculum. So there was none of that. So yeah, I think it's kind of the lack of infrastructure, the lack of help is the
Mhm.
right way to put it. And then, yeah, the cost, right?
Mhm.
When you're trying to raise a family in California, and unfortunately, the math is such that, a lot of families need both parents working.
Yeah. When you look back at the sort of amazing commitment that it took for your parents to not only raise you, but to also educate you at home, right? You mentioned that dad would cook, mom would work late, that kind of thing, right? So they'd like trade off, that kind of thing.
Yep.
When you look back on that, how does that make you feel?
I mean, pretty awesome. I mean, I'm still very close with my parents today, and it's, actions speak louder than words. Nothing's
Yeah.
perfect, right? So, but it makes you feel very, it's interesting. It's like for a child, it makes you feel very stable,
Yeah.
psychologically. And this is the breakdown that you see when you don't have two parents
Yeah.
in the house and you don't have support. It's very easy to see that, you have not financially, we were raised very middle class. I mean, there
Mhm.
was years were very, very hard financial situations. So it wasn't like we were privileged financially, but you're
Mhm.
privileged psychologically
Yeah.
to have that comfort, right? That every child needs, so that when they are 17, they feel confident saying, yeah, I'll go try this. I'll go
Yeah.
try something new. And if I fail, that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, thankful doesn't really cut it, but it
Mhm.
is, the older that you get, the more that you think about it, you're like, man, I mean, yeah, no wonder we have the breakdown that we do in society when there isn't that security for children. So yeah, and they made it work. And again, it wasn't perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it was cool that they identified something that, they wanted and they went for it. They wanted to homeschool
Absolutely.
their kids and they went for it and they figured it out. So yeah. And I do think, without a doubt, I mean, again, nothing's perfect. There's always things you're like, now that I have a child, I'm like, oh, I could do that better and that better, right? It's easy to do that. And that's what we should be doing generationally. But without a doubt, we're better off not having been in that public school system for sure.
Yeah.
For
So you
sure.
end up going to school your freshman year, and you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about. One of the things that happened with our children was they went to private school, a Christian school,
Yeah.
during their elementary years, and we moved our son and our daughter to another school. It's a charter school system, so again, school choice thing, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that we figured out, or one of the things we found, was my son had been held back, or felt like he was being held back, because he was exceptional. He's just a brainiac, but he was
Yeah.
exceptional at math.
Hmm.
And what they were doing was they were holding him and other students back because there were other students in the class that weren't getting it, right?
Yeah.
They weren't as good in terms of math, right? So we moved him to this charter system, and they sort of let him go. They let him take off, and he jumped like 3 grades in 1 year in
Yeah.
math. I mean, the kid just blossomed like there was no tomorrow, and he gained confidence from it.
Yeah. Of
And it
course.
was it was amazing to watch. It was just incredible. The reason I wanted to mention this or ask you about it was, you mentioned that when you got into school in your freshman year, you realized that they were sort of holding back the kids that could excel, because there were other people in the classroom that couldn't necessarily get there that fast, right? Talk about how that felt. Was that frustrating for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the particular school I was in was kind of wild because you
Mhm.
had kind of the smartest kids in the entire area in Northern
From
California.
everywhere, right? 30
Yeah,
different languages. I mean, how
you'd have
diverse
kids
is that?
driving an hour and a half or 2 hours because of this program and how rigorous it was. They were
Yeah.
off the charts smart. And then you'd have local families. This is their local public school. English is their second or third language,
Yeah.
and they have no support at home and they are just acting out to get
Yeah.
attention, right? You've got that kind of your typical, like, unfortunately, kind of your typical public school story. So, I mean, for me, I quickly just read the room and knew what was going on and made the best of it. I mean,
Yeah.
my goal was never, again, thankfully, my parents never put this on us. It wasn't like, hey, you need to get an X, Y, or Z score on the SAT and you need to
Mhm.
get into these schools. It's never what it was. It was
Yeah.
always,
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.